here. All right, good evening. It is Wednesday, May 10th at 6 p.m. We are at the Keizer Civic Center for the Keizer Planning Commission meeting. Debbie's noted attendance. Looks like we have a full house, which is great. And first item will be the approval of the minutes from April 2023. Is there a motion on the minutes from April 2023?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the minutes as presented. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. And everyone's here, which is great. All right, appearance of interested citizens. We've got nobody signed up on that, right? Rob, you got anything for us tonight? No? Okay. Great, flying right through. Okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Go ahead.
Does the city have like the ability for people to attend, virtually?
They requested, we can put them on a conference phone. To do the Zoom thing is a little more complicated, but we can do that too. Am I right, Shannon?
So you're doing Zoom, not Teams, so it's a Zoom platform that Keizer's using?
It has to be set up in advance. So it's not like available automatically.
Okay, all I know is my own commission, ever since we have switched to these virtual meetings, we get a lot more
Oh, yeah.
participation from
Yeah.
folks coming in. And, I see just recently where the question was asked on media being able to attend executive sessions, can they attend virtually too? And we had said that as long as anybody's allowed in there virtually, then media is also allowed on executive sessions. But anyway, I was just curious to see if folks can stay at home on their laptop and business, because it seems like we're talking about money today, and I'm a little surprised there isn't people here to talk about money.
We have, council has some procedures, and I believe it's kind of an assumption that the committees under the council will follow those same procedures. And I believe that part of it is that if you want to meet via Zoom or via telephone electronically, you need to ask the chair, and the chair asks the committee if they're okay with that. They go on, if it's okay, then you can go ahead. But they also say something that needs to be kind of extenuating circumstances or an emergency or that sort of thing. But I don't know, there's no definition on that.
Well, and I think that, I just want to point out, in the agenda notification at the top in the gray area, it does kind of call out that process. I don't know that I don't know, even when we were doing remote, that we really had anybody ever participate remotely that I recall for planning commission, but I think for council, it was a couple people, but it wasn't very often.
Yeah.
On the Arts Commission, sometimes they only meet every other month, and they do meet to approve artwork that goes in the gallery. So if somebody can't make it into the meeting, we usually let them come, but they usually do it by phone rather than Zoom. It's a lot less complicated. It's not quite as interactive, though.
Well, and part of it, if I recall, is an expense issue too, right? Because it's more expensive to have the Zoom tied in with the live feed, because this goes over
Right.
Keizer TV and some of the other local channel 23. So it's just,
Although other places have pulled it off, and I think we tried to pull it off once, what we call the hybrid meeting.
right.
Where we have a partial group present physically and then part Zoom, just doesn't seem to work well. All Zoom is fine, but when we have part and part, it just glitches. But we've tried that. The current, I didn't bring them with me. I usually bring them to all the council meetings, but the council procedures has what Deb's talking about. I don't remember the exact language, but it is, I think, a showing of need or some vague language, but in other words, it's not supposed to be every meeting. Like, we've had ones with council that frankly worked better on Zoom because we were looking at documents,
Right.
and they could just do the share screen, and it actually worked better by Zoom than try to do it in person, and that, for a work session or something, that worked fine.
Well, I apologize for derailing.
No, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's a slippery slope then, because it's like, do the comments in the chat become part of the official record and some of those other things? But
But in general, though, I mean,
online is one way, but it's probably a subject worthy of a discussion. How do we encourage the public participation? We see nobody ever comes here.
I think we just need to have chickens and ducks every single planning commission meeting on the agenda, because we got lots of people show up for that, even if we don't talk about them. I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but unfortunately, I mean, it's just, planning's just a hard, topic for a lot of people to want to engage in. I mean, I think that, at least my observation has been, most folks don't appreciate it until it's right next door, and then the sort of direct impact of the policies and the choices impact their livability. And I think that that's where, you know, before a conditional use process would have been probably an area where some folks would come around, but I mean, now it's kind of like, a lot of it's legislative, and they don't necessarily, I think it's hard for people to understand what the legislative process means to them in their space at their time. It's just really hard to get that across.
Also, I mean, I'm not sure if that is probably true, but there are, people don't know that
Can you make sure your mic's on if you don't mind, please? And then just speak in your mic.
It was they don't know we exist. This exists. A lot of people don't. How do we get the word out there that, yes, it is there, it is an option for them to participate
Yeah.
and have a say-so? I don't think we do much in terms of getting ourselves out there, advertising, putting it on the Keizer Times or whatever, something can be done.
I know that the way the city does the notification, I mean, their Facebook presence has increased a lot in the last couple of years. It's out there. Again, this is just a topic that's like, it's tough. I mean, people just don't generally engage until they recognize that it's going to potentially impact them in their space. I mean,
We can
that's just
accept
my
that
observation.
and live with it, or we can say, hey, what can we do to encourage?
I mean, maybe we just make every agenda item seem really scary. And I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but I mean, unless there's something out there that draws people's attention, like, you know, for, you know, John and Sue Smith that live on, you know, Main Street, they don't care about planning fees. They're not planning on buying a house or building a house. But when they go to build the house, they're like, wait a minute, we heard, you know, Jack and Susie built their house 5 years ago and it cost them this much. Why all of a sudden is it a thing? Well, this happened, you know, at this planning commission date and so on and so forth. So it's like, I'm all over Commissioner Grant's space here. Commissioner Sauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know, so when we had COVID and I was sitting on the budget, we had a lot more participation when it was a Zoom meeting from people than we had. I mean, yesterday, there were people here, but it wasn't like, we was like 80 people watching the budget when we were in Zoom. So I think there can be an increase of participation when we do have it open for people to be on Zoom. And maybe it was COVID and everyone was home and they had nothing else better to do. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some factors associated with that. But, you know, I do agree with Mo's assessment that we shouldn't just accept the fact that we have one, you know, citizen here on a meeting. We should maybe try to do something. And if there is an opportunity for us to have our meetings on our, I mean, we could be here, but on Zoom so that people can come in and look at it from the computer opposed to, I don't know, that and interact, and we might get more feedback. But you're right. If everything was a big deal, then we'd have more individuals here. I know when I sat on a previous planning commission, when we did actual approval of subdivisions, the public hearing could be an hour and a half at a room full of people, all with 5 minutes. And that was very, very common to be when you were making recommendations to approve subdivisions. And that was, you know, that was a lot of community involvement in there. But
I'd like to,
1 second, Shane.
Oh, it's okay. I mean,
Okay,
I can wait.
Commissioner.
thank you, Chair. So I am concurring with everything that's been said here, but I think
Bless you.
when it's just, we're doing Scrivener errors and updates, it's not that critical. But things like this is massive, this is sudden. And I feel like this should have gone out to the public and alerted them that this is happening and much more time. I feel like it was kind of just sprung on us. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. It just seems like a bigger deal than some of the other topics we've considered.
Sure. Oh, I was just going to kind of speak to all of the comments. I think that the concern is absolutely valid from Planning Commission's perspective of how do you engage more people and more of your citizenry. I think from the government, the big picture, that is a question that all governments struggle with and look to find ways to engage more people. I mean, that's kind of the desire. That's the purpose of governing bodies, is to hear what the people have to say. I know that the city and our city council currently they're very serious about that. They've created a community diversity engagement committee in part to look at better ways that we can get more involvement. But I would say this, that the lack of involvement in the planning world is not unique to Keizer. It is pretty common with at least my counterparts in other cities. And what always blows my mind is when we do have bigger planning projects where we have consulting firms and we end up having an open house event or a round table that we invite people to, and 10 people show up, and Shane is disappointed because I'm like, I gotta just and I'll tell people that I interact with, but many times the consultants are very happy with even those kinds of numbers because it's not unique to us. One thing I would offer is I can look into and talk with our tech folks and our IT people. Shannon's absolutely right with the hybrid version of meetings. We were forced obviously to go to all virtual a couple years ago, and we did see a little bit of a peak. Now, anecdotally in my circles, some of us have said, well, yeah, people were more engaged because people were also bored out of their gourds and they couldn't go anywhere. And so everybody was living through online lives at a whole nother level that we hadn't historically been doing. So I think there was somewhat of a peak, but I would agree that there are a lot of organizations and entities that do more in the virtual world. I can check into the possibilities of what would it take and is it possible through technology to provide not just the K23 feed, but is there an ability for us to have a Zoom link that people could chime in on and do? We have had times at council meetings where we try to set that up and it is a big deal. And I know that at one point, and I don't know if it's been resolved because I am not the IT department, I'm not the TV people, but I know that we lacked a certain piece of equipment to allow that to actually function. So for a season in Keizer, it was basically determined, hey, if you're gonna do a meeting Zoom, it's either gotta all be Zoom or no Zoom, because we can't do the hybrid because it wouldn't work. But I'll check into that. I think it's worth checking. If it's something that's as easy as flipping a switch and rolling out a TV monitor, that if people are in the Zoom link, that somebody's monitoring that, if that's me or Debbie or Dina or something, and if there's people that want to testify that way, we can see if it's possible. I'm just not 100% sure that we currently have the technology for that. I think if that's something very important to Planning Commission, I think that's a fair thing to we can look into it for you, at least at some level, if that's helpful. So.
I think that we should look into that, and that's one tool that we could use, the virtual participation. But we should also just look into, as a subcommittee outside of here or something, I'd be happy to facilitate it if then a few people volunteer, including somebody from the staff. See what other mechanisms are there to get the public involved. That's just one tool. But there may be other tools that we haven't even considered. Maybe we should.
This is a conversation that Shane and I have had often about getting people in and trying to come up with new ways. I think if somebody's got options, I think it's certainly worth getting into. Goal 1 and land use is public participation for a reason. It's almost the hardest goal to achieve, I think, when it comes to land use. So, but we're also not doing a tremendous amount of land use. A lot of what we're doing is specifically legislative, so.
And that would be one thing I would kind of offer. I mean, I think that Commissioner Saldivar's example is a great example. When I have public hearings on subdivisions, generally some people show up. We still don't have a ton. Commissioner Granz has been to several of those subdivision hearings over the years, and, we've had some that have been quite a few, but like if we hit 15 people that show up, that's a pretty well-attended meeting.
That's a party.
And the difference with legislative process, which is primarily what the Planning Commission deals with, and the quasi-judicial process with the hearings officer, is that we send out specific notice to everyone within 250 feet of that property. So you're getting more engagement as far as numbers, but it's not necessary. It's really the people that it directly affects, because they're getting special notice of that. In this specific process that we're taking up tonight, we're having a public hearing here, and then based on your recommendation, there'll be another public hearing at City Council. Some of the things that we do currently do, and I don't know if you all know this or not, but I'll kind of throw it out there. We do put it on the city's Facebook page. Dina kind of manages that for us. She posts these meetings normally multiple times, and as they come up to it, it's on our city's website. It does get advertised in the paper. All public hearings get advertised in the newspaper. Again, that's a hard one because the world has changed and less people look at newspapers, but that's also born in statute of how we do that. But we do put it out on the digital platforms the city has. All the notices also get put on the website as well. It's hard. We use the tools that we have, but man, I would love it if Planning Commission had an idea for a different new tool that we don't have that we could utilize, because that is always the desire.
The one thing that might be helpful, and this isn't something that's been pushed in a while, and maybe if I'm wrong, Debbie, please don't be mad, but it felt like a number of years ago, something went out where it was like, hey, here's a way you can subscribe to the various meeting agendas and things like that. And I don't feel like, I know you can do that, but I don't feel like it's been on the city's website or Facebook page for a while. Like,
It's always on the website.
Right.
If you want to be involved.
Right.
I could put it on the scrolling thing across the top.
Well, maybe even on Facebook, because I know that
I
the,
think it's on Facebook too, isn't it? Okay, I will say that, okay.
is it? No. I just think it might, because I know like most of the neighborhood associations pick those things up. And so that might be a good way to organically drive content to folks. Because if they self-select for the various agendas, they're automatically going to get those notifications. So that's just one way to get it out there. But yeah, that's been an interesting conversation. Thanks. I think it's important. I mean, like, it's one of those things that Shane and I have talked about a lot. I mean, over the last 5 or 6 years, is just like, how do we, I mean, literally, our 2 most attended public hearings here were about chickens, and we talked about the UT zone, but that was because there was a very specific mailing list, because the first time we didn't get enough people, and we made you go back, and we got a lot more.
We mailed it to every single property owner.
Yeah,
Yeah. So.
and that's just bloody expensive. We sent it out to every single property owner.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any additional thoughts?
No thoughts, but what's the result of the conversation?
Well, what I heard from,
Well, I can report back to you guys on some information that I find out from. I'll check into that before our next meeting and see what the current possibilities are with the resources that we have. That's what I can do. I don't know, Shannon, I don't know if there's anything that Planning Commission can do as far as formal recommendations to council or anything like that regarding this subject.
Well, I think we got a pretty much consensus on the general concept. So I made a note that we'll have a reminder and talk about it with the city manager. So I don't know that we need a formal recommendation. I think we'll get some ideas together and come back before you folks and kind of tell you what we've talked about. You got to remember that it's really falling into 2 categories. One is making it easier for people to appear by maybe physically not coming down here and how the tech would work. But they can't know to do that unless they hear about it, which was the other half of this whole discussion. And I can tell you, I've been doing this for a lot of years. This is the most common thing year after year. And we keep trying to get more words out in other ways. And, there's only so much you can do to get the word out. If If it's a topic that the council really wants to be sure the word gets out, we will work sometimes with the chamber or with other organizations. Some of you have been around long enough, this wasn't that long ago. The police and the park fees.
Yep.
That outreach was not just the city's outreach, but it was, driven by the city and the chamber and other groups. And for those of you who might remember, it was on almost every business reader board in town, okay? Because we did not want, that was not going to a vote of the people.
Right.
And we did not want people saying, whoa, what do you mean you're increasing this? We never heard about this. There's no one in Keizer could say they didn't hear about it, in my
It was
opinion.
also a year and a half process though, too.
Pardon?
That also was a year and a half process.
Exactly. It's a very good point, Matt. So you have to kind of divide those two things up, both the physical or technical access, but also finding out about it first and how you get to that. I think we got a good consensus from you folks about what you want. And Shane and I will talk to the city manager and see what kind of ideas we can come up with.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that you just, the outreach piece, I was just thinking about the neighborhood associations and the neighborhood I live in, the association meeting is next week. And so when I got the agenda, when are the agenda sets? Like, I know you sent me the email out with this packet like a week ago.
It's usually the week before.
Yeah, and so
Wednesday before.
yeah, the Wednesday before. And so that's, it would be if the schedule was different and the agenda was out and I could go to the meeting and then present that to the neighborhood association meeting, you might have more people coming. But with 1 week time frame to get the word out, it wouldn't be something possible for us to.
Many of your people in your neighborhood associations are on my list. They automatically get the agendas. In fact, I think all the neighborhood associations are on all of my committee lists.
Right, but if we don't have our meeting, so like the neighborhood association
They
is
get it
next
done and
week.
everything the week before. Oh, the week before this meeting. Oh, I see.
Yeah,
what you're
right, yeah, so
saying.
that,
Yes.
so the committee gets the chair might get the email, but not all the members in the association who show up to the meeting will be able to hear about
We-
the agenda.
Shane probably wouldn't be excited about this, but we can get the word out about what the topic would be, because we know what the topic is usually.
Yeah.
We just don't have the staff report and the detail done, if you see what I'm getting at.
Right.
So we
Right.
could look at that as one of the number of avenues to get more word out.
Right, that would be even just a topic, like in this case, fee increases, not knowing specifically what it is, but just to say that, I could have done that last month, and maybe there'd be more people here who would be interested in seeing or having input on what those might be.
Yeah, and I think, I'd like to create a call to action for the neighborhood associations too. If there's somebody within the executive body of those organizations and they get these emails, get it out to your folks. Southeast Kaiser's awesome at doing that. I don't know where you live, in terms of like which neighborhood association. But like Ken picks up everything that the city puts out, emails, whatever, and gets it out there on Facebook. And I get emails from him like usually 20 minutes after Debbie sends our notifications and stuff. So, but, I think there's, topics would be good, maybe a little bit earlier. I think that there's some challenge to that kind of based off of different DLCD notification timelines and things like that, but.
Well, this one would be a good example. I imagine this didn't just like come up a week ago, right? This was probably something that was in the works prior to that, I imagine, or maybe I'm making an assumption here. I apologize for that, but that, we could have had that topic and I could last month been able to say, hey.
All right, last comment, and then we need to get into the agenda, please.
So there are a lot of opinions, there are a lot of comments, there are a lot of ideas. I don't think this is the place to go through all of them because there's a lot of stuff on the agenda. Again, my recommendation is a subcommittee of
Well, we have to be-
commission and its staff, and then brainstorm, throw ideas out there, evaluate them among themselves, and bring it as a proposal here. That's what I would like to suggest.
We have to be careful on the subcommittee piece of it. I think there's some specific rules regarding that, correct? Subcommittee of the planning commission?
I'm sorry, I was chatting with
Specific rules
Shane.
around subcommittees of the planning commission?
If you, the rule is that any committee can create a committee as long as it's only a subcommittee.
Right,
You
okay.
can't create a committee with somebody else as a member other than one of you. If you do create a committee, that's a public body and has to abide by all the public meetings rules, regardless of how, small it might be, even if it was 2 people.
Yeah. I think, I don't disagree with the committee idea. I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see what Shane and the city attorney come back with in terms of ideas. And then maybe based off of that, we can kind of talk about a subcommittee and flesh out, kind of dive into some specifics on that. That would just be my thought. Otherwise, I think that we might be spinning our wheels just a little bit until ultimately we get information back from them anyways. That's just kind of my 2 bets.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right, so all that being said, we have agenda item number 4, which is the public hearing on the Planning Department administrative action fees and land use fees. I will open the public hearing at 6:26. Shane, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. You guys got the staff report and a chart and then some additional information, which was some comparative cities work. I have to give Dina a ton of credit for this one. She did a lot of research for us as we looked at this. As the staff report kind of puts out, it was brought to our attention, no, this was not just last week. This was something that is, with House Bill 2001, we established a new process for middle housing land division. And we don't technically have a specific fee associated with middle housing land division. Now, Shannon and I had a conversation, kind of an offhanded conversation, and I may have taken what he said a certain way that I shouldn't have, because I'm not a lawyer. And so I had erroneously been under the impression that when that first middle housing land division application came in, I would be applying the same rule and fee that I do to an expedited land division, which we already established back in 2016 when the state created that everybody had to have an expedited land division process. And interestingly enough, we've never processed an expedited land division because any developer that has worked with me or Dina or our predecessors would say everything in Keizer is an expedited land division. We do things quickly and they don't want to pay those extra fees. But there's some statutory requirements around those. I have to own that I thought those applied to middle housing. They did not. So primarily we were bringing fees to establish those fees. And when we did that, I asked some questions. As you know, I'm a somewhat newer director here. But I have worked at the city for 25 years. And for the most part, in the planning department, our fees have remained static that entire time. So there's been a few times that fees were increased. We had, like I said, in 2016, we had to establish the expedited fee. In 2014, we had to kind of look back in, and I did work here then, but I wasn't really involved in that process. Fees were established for our land use fees, where the planning staff at that time had actually tracked time spent on individual applications and came up with a number and went through the process. So since we were opening up the fees and having to add to them, we thought it would make sense to kind of look at what had been done historically, look at some other cities and what they are charging, because we know our fees are low. We've purposefully kept our fees low. It's one of our strategies we identified as far as being something that helps promote development within our city. But one of the things we looked at is okay, just the simple staff increase over the years of cost of living adjustments and wages has gone up. And so that is what we're reflecting in the chart is a 21.5% increase that is, as you see from the comparatives, we still pretty much have the lowest fees around. But I was not proposing or recommending that we would do a massive overhaul of the fees because I do not have the data. We have not spent the time to track every minute or hour we spend on land use applications. We just do them. And what I'd like to do, what I'm planning to do moving forward, especially the great reminder of sitting through 2 nights of budget committee meetings and the overall state of the city and the budget is that I have a responsibility as a planning director of the city of Keizer to try to make sure that our fees are somewhat recapturing the costs that we're spending on processing those applications. So the plan is to, at least to some level, look as we process applications and go, boy, what kind of time are we spending on these things? Does there need to be a bigger adjustment? Because if I was strictly looking at comparative cities and, oh, well, cities charge this, so we should charge this, you could argue that our fees should be quite a bit higher depending on which cities you're looking at. Couple things we found out in the research. It is not easy to compare apples to apples when it comes to fees, because every city treats land use applications a little differently, and how and what they charge for and what those amounts are. So that's where, if there was a good apples to apples comparison, my recommendation tonight might be a lot different. But because there's not, I feel that the only responsible thing that I would be comfortable with putting my name on would to be able to say, hey, our partition fee is this much, and we've been spending this much time and this much expense on review, so that needs to be increased. But I don't have that data to support that. What I do have is a long-held fee that has been established and a very defined amount that has been increased over the years that we've never indexed. And so that's what we're proposing tonight with that 21.5% increase, with the one exception, and the one exception is our legal lot determination fee. And our legal lot determination fee, we're proposing that we would increase that fee to match our final plat review fee at $437. The legal lot determination process is a process that doesn't get used very often. And it was a fee of $77. And the legal lot determination process is not a process that this staff member spends hours doing. It's a process that the city attorney has to go through. I asked the city attorney's office and his legal assistant if they could kind of maybe give me an average on how much time they spend on these legal lot determinations. And I believe the response I got back was 6 to 8 hours. So that $437 is a very, very low cost for what they've spent on some of our applications. But because it was such a huge increase, I felt like, hey, that does not make sense to go bust out and say a legal lot determination is thousands of dollars to recapture all the costs, because some of them are much simpler and would take less time. But what we felt was appropriate is that final plat review. There's been a lot of work, but you still are looking at things and having to call people in and check things over. So we felt like that was an appropriate comparative. But that one, I mean, that is absolutely one that I'm making a judgment call based on what I think makes sense. So those, anyway, as I said, the chart, there's not really anything big and crazy other than 21.5% can seem really large. Obviously, that's a big fee increase, but it is directly correlated to those cost of living adjustments that we've not accounted for over those years. So that's why we're proposing what we're proposing. And with that, I am happy to answer your questions, or Dina may have to.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. Thanks, Shane, for that explanation. I appreciate that. So on that cost of living, did you use like the CPI?
I used the actual cost of livings that have been applied to the city of Keizer staff for non-represented employees, which is what our department employs. So I got it directly from our finance director.
Okay. And
Which
those
isn't a real cost of living, by the way, because there's some years that we don't get cost of living raises.
Right, so those numbers are just sort of random too. They weren't tied to any sort of CPI index.
No, they are. Yeah, no, in our city's personnel policies, they are tied. I don't remember which CPI rate it is, but it's spelled out in the city's personnel policies. But the budget every year has to be approved by the budget committee and the city council. So there are years where cost of living adjustments for city staff don't exactly match up. So like if you look at certain cost of living rates over the last few years, they've been huge, like 8, 9, 10%, depending on the indexes you're looking at. We did not get an 8 or 9 or 10% raise last year.
So
Yeah.
I think what Shane is saying is, this is echoey, isn't it?
Yeah, yours is mine.
This is the one that Bill was using. I think what Shane was saying is that the 21.5% is the actual CPI that the city staff got. So the real CPI was more than that, if you see what I'm getting at. Because they don't always give us the full CPI. It's just what the budget allows.
Okay, and I have another couple of questions. So budgets are happening right now. Sometime hopefully I can get on the budget committee because I would love to learn more about that. But are these fee increases then already being baked into this new
No.
budget?
No. I should have brought Tim, our finance director. Maybe Shannon. Shannon's done a lot more budgets than I have. I've only done 3 budgets with the city. There's the last 3 years, and the first year didn't count because it was already done before I just was like, oh, this is what it is. Okay. But realistically, in the city budget, it's a huge budget, obviously. There's a ton of funds. The planning department is general fund dollars, and we project based on the working document what kind of revenues we think we're going to get. We base those on historical actual numbers that we've taken in from the year before. And so Tim, our finance director, will ask us as he's preparing the budget document and putting numbers together, hey, how many land use cases have you done so far this year? How many do you think you're going to do by the end of the year? So we make a educated guess on what we think those revenues that will be projected, which is exactly what we did this year. We did not project a greater amount of revenue coming in on the basis of this. Realistically, land use cases it's very hard to know what and how many land use cases are going to come in that people are paying for each year. Most of the development we've had this year that you see physically did not involve a land use case. They're just building permits. So I think, how many, do you know off the top of your head how many cases we did this year? 24, 23 this year? Or last year? Was it less than 20? Like 16? Yeah, so I think there was 16 land use cases last year in total that we processed, either partitions or subdivisions, but that also includes variances and lot line adjustments and things like that. This is kind of the nature of a city that's running out of land. But that doesn't capture building permits because we did an all-time high last year for multifamily housing units that started. So it's just,
Okay.
yeah.
So are you responsible for those building permit fees and everything too, your department? And none of that is here that we're seeing tonight?
No, and we're, the one thing that is in the fee list, because Tammy said it had to be there, I was gonna take it off because I wasn't looking at that. Building permit fees, Dina might be able to speak to this better because she has more history with building permit fees, but essentially, Marion County Building Inspection Division is the building official. So we administratively process building fees, and I believe we get 20% of the building fee. And the building fee is established, I think it's in the chart, I think it says 20% of the building fee. That's the same amount we've gotten for the building fee for ever, since 1998, when Dina started working here, we started a building department, or 10%, and then it went up. So we've gotten 20% of the building fee for a very long time as part of our processing fee, and then there's an administrative fee for our processing of 10%, and that's based on the Marion County fees for building permits. We don't establish those, they do.
Okay, so none of those fees
No.
are going up by Keizer City?
No,
Those
this
come
would,
from
this would,
Marion
yeah,
County.
not with this. What we're
Yeah, yeah.
proposing is specifically lot line adjustments, partitions, the land use applications that people come to because, well, with Marion County building fees, with technology now, it used to be we had a cash drawer and people wrote a lot of checks. Most of the time, they're paying online with a credit card that's going through the county's system, and it's a matter of accounting spreadsheets that get sent between Marion County and Keizer to make the books correct on who's getting what % of those fees.
Okay, that's super helpful, thank you. So one last thing, do we know like what an average cost to a land developer, let's say they're doing a big multi-unit apartment complex, do we have an average like fee that they would pay per unit, let's say? Like if it's units, do we know from your numbers here, on average, how much money would each unit cost that developer with these fees?
Are you talking about for the building permits?
No, I'm talking about for any land use stuff that we're seeing on these charts.
Well, so for we'll use the River Road apartments that are going up right now.
And are developers only needing to use a couple of these things? It's not like they used all 3 pages worth of these thingies.
Oh,
right?
no.
Thingies.
No, so
It's one
so,
or two things they might have
okay,
to do.
yeah, so
Okay,
okay, I'm gonna try, it gets a little bit weird, but, so there's a lot of different fees that the development community will kind of group all together generally and say, oh, it cost me all this money. What we're talking about tonight are specifically land use fees, so with an apartment complex that is already zoned for apartments. So River Road, it was zoned mixed use, already zoned mixed use. There was no land use action. They literally walked in the door and applied for building permits. Now, because it's a commercial project, they're gonna do some public construction stuff through our Public Works and City Engineer's office, not on these, it has nothing to do with these fees. For these fees, the fees that would have affected them was the site plan review fee.
Okay.
Where's that? Thank you. I gotta do it, guys. So the site plan review fee for commercial, so we collected for that project a whopping $236 currently.
Yeah.
Now, their building fees, they had to pay thousands of dollars for the building fees because those are based on valuation of the project being built. And they would have had to pay system development charges, which are not in these fees. Those are different. They're established by methodologies. So they would have paid big fees for transportation systems development, park systems development, water service, building permits. I mean, it would have been tens of thousands of dollars.
That's not from the city of Keizer.
But
That's all
the
Marion
planning department specific review cost them $236 for the site plan review, plus that 20% of their building fee would have went into the general fund dollars, and then the 10% of the administration portion of that. That's right, Dina? There would be nothing else, yeah.
Thank you. That
Okay.
really helps me, thanks.
I have the luxury of sitting on budget, and I have it right here, just to put it in perspective, the budgeted fee collection for their department is $57,000. So a 21% increase on that would be less than $10,000 increase. So we're not talking about a large amount of money. At least I don't see that on it.
But that's all, including SECs and everything else, right? That's not, that's just this.
The budget amount would just be the fees, the actual planning fees. SDCs and stuff would be a different
Right, it
budget.
has this signed permits, land use application fee, building fee,
Yeah.
zoning, permit.
These types of
administration
things,
fee.
yeah.
Yeah, so that,
Great, thank
so,
you.
so the one thing about that, because it does include that building fee and
That's not going
that surcharge, we're not proposing that goes up. And a pretty big portion of that money is that, because
It's
we
like
built
$5,000.
247 apartments that we collected building permits on, which were big multi-million-dollar projects.
Got it.
Commissioner Robichaud?
I know the increase is just a number, you pick based on the cost of living, but the other numbers that these costs, the ad hoc number, has a study ever been done to see how long the process takes, how many engineering hours, how many planning hours, and base it on that, or is just a number somebody's picked?
So in 2014, when our land use fees were established, that is what they did. I can't speak to how perfect or accurate it was because I wasn't a part of doing that analysis, but city staff at that time put together a package that they took to the planning commission at that time, and then ultimately the city council. I had to kind of look back through some minutes. And that 2014 process was what established these current bases that we look at today. And then in 2016, they added expedited reviews because they had to. So like I said, I don't have a big dog in the fight. This is not this is not a move that Shane is trying to do to balance the planning department budget or make a bunch of money or provide extra employees. This isn't going to cut it. Like, and Keizer's not going to cut it. If we had massive land to develop, then different story. We could jack up fees and fund some stuff, but we don't have that kind of development happening. This is really, and again, like, Planning Commission, it is your job to make a recommendation on how you see fit. And so I'm going to take no offense one way or the other. If you say, we don't want you to do anything, the only thing I'm going to push hard on is my attorney told me we have to have a fee for the middle housing land division stuff. That we need to iron that out for sure. The other stuff is really, this is my recommendation because this is what I think makes sense for us in this moment, and I can justify it to my friends. I can justify it to every developer that walks in. I'm not gouging them. This is very reasonable. In fact, it's really, really cheap still. And as I said, my intention is, I think it's responsible for Dina and I to take a look at what kind of time is being spent from the city engineer's office, from who all is getting involved touching these applications. My suspicion is that at some point in the future, and I don't want to do it on just one application. I want to do it on 6 months or a year's worth of applications to figure out if there's some data and some trending points that I can look at, and then I may be asking to come back to you all and say, hey guys, gals, we need to rethink this, and this is why. But I did not have that information for this time, and there is a timeliness factor for the middle housing land divisions because we are getting more and more questions from developers and property owners about the possibility of wanting to do that. And I don't want to get sideways or get sued because I charge them a fee that I'm not supposed to. So.
I guess I'm proponent of whatever we do, we start the data collection and have the study done for the future potential increases and whatnot, right? So our information should be based on actual data rather than a number that was established many years ago. We don't know, because I'm looking at the delta between us and the other cities, and there's no telling what the heck is going on. The deltas are so big, one way or the other, there has to be reasons for it, right? So we need to figure out what those are and how we are more data-based.
Well, I think, I don't disagree with that as a general rule, and Commissioner Burst, I know you raised your hand. What I will say is, though, this hasn't been updated in 10 years. And so for 10 years, is it accurate?
It's not quite 10, 9.
Okay, excuse me, as I was. 9 years. So in that 9 years, if you were to do an annual increase of, let's call it 3.5% over that time, you'd actually be over that by this point, correct?
Right, but remember, we based the 21.5% on what actually was received and approved through the budget that showed up in Shane's paycheck every year for the increase. To make it simple, like my finance director literally told me, okay, from this time to this time, and it's not the same cost of living that the police or the collective bargaining units got, because those are different employment bases. But our staff in the planning department is an unrepresented staff. So there were years we got 0% in cost of living because the budget at Keizer didn't allow for us to get a cost of living raise. So it literally, the 21.5%, and that's why I said it's a real world cost. That when we established this in 2014, we said this is how much it costs us, right or wrong, this is how much it costs us to do partitions, to do subdivisions, to do lot line adjustments, to do all of these items. So since that time, we know that it costs us 21.5% more based on the cost of living adjustments alone. Okay. So that's why I felt very comfortable with recommending that to you tonight. I didn't provide it. Dina provided the comparables. She did the work for me. She did an awesome job of putting that together. We provided those comparables from my perspective in the hopes to kind of give you some assurance that, one, Shane's not crazy and just making up a 21.5% number or anything like that, which is why we based it on the COLA. And then on top of that, that even with that, you can see by the comparables, there's several fees that are much lower And even the fees that are higher in a couple of them, they're right in the range of where we're at. So it's not grossly off base. But, I mean, absolutely, if Planning Commission is uncomfortable and needs more data from us, that's perfectly fine, with the exception of, I do need something about middle housing for sure.
I'm not suggesting that, I'm not opposing the increase, I'm not opposing, you're right, some of the fees are even, seem pretty low to me. I'm just saying that moving forward, we need to make these based on something, rather than
Right.
just a number that was dropped. We should somehow move toward that direction, make these mean something.
Commissioner Burson?
Yeah, so, first of all, I'd just like to thank you for bringing this forward, because, I think waiting 9 years is a mistake, but, you can't spin the world backwards and go 9 years back and do it over again, so I think it's worth having the conversation now, and sometimes that first conversation after you ignored it so long, it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes, when you just look at percentages.
Yep.
If you actually look at dollar amounts here, it isn't near as scary. Now, I was in the budget committee for 12 years, so I understand the budget pretty darn well. And I also, one thing I understand about the budget is that every year, the general fund is always challenged in some way. And so, people are asking Keizer to do something, do land use planning. I don't think it's out of the ordinary to ask them to pay for that and help alleviate some of those costs and go back in the general fund, which goes directly into the planning department. And again, we're really not talking about huge numbers, probably less than 5 figures that's happened here over a year's time. So, you know, I just want to say I appreciate that, and I agree with Commissioner Avison that that in the future, instead of kind of having this, oh, we've waited like 9 years, and so let's try to figure it out.
Yes.
We actually have some data from the year before, like we spent so much time
Yep.
doing these things. And if you need an increase, come to us. And that way that, you know, we'll kind of hit this along the way. But it's not your fault for waiting so long, because it wasn't your responsibility at the time. So I appreciate you bringing this in here and talking about it. And the other thing is the 21 point some, again, I'm gonna go back to like our first conversation tonight. Nobody's knocking down the doors here. You know, I don't see protesters outside saying, you know, so I'm pretty comfortable with your proposal here, just kind of getting everything caught up. And then as we go year to year, we review this and see, are we hitting the right spot? Are we too high, are we too low?
Sure.
For Keizer, not for Newburgh or
Yep.
Silverton and the other comparables you have, but for Keizer, are we in the right place?
And I appreciate that, Commissioner Burson, and that's why, like I said, my intention is to base some of our data on reality, which is to actually track what kind of time is being spent on these applications in Keizer by those processing them and the entities processing them. So
So just one quick follow-up.
Yeah, please.
Thanks, Chair. So, but if we see a red Ferrari running around Keizer with a planning department sign on the side of it, we'll come back and talk.
well, if any of,
There's a joke in there somewhere, Commissioner, I'm not touching it. You know, I think it'd be interesting, just as an exercise, like, over the course of the next year, if you choose to pick like 2 more streamlined projects, right? And see what that actual cost is, and then find those couple that are gonna make you scratch your head and think a little bit, and also track those. That would just be really interesting to see and I don't imagine you're probably doing hundreds of these a year, right? And you're probably in the tens.
I think it was 16 is what we projected to our finance director this last year.
Right. I have a question for the city attorney. In our recommendation, if we choose to make a recommendation tonight, could we tie the recommendation to the annual COLA subject to review by the council annually?
I think you can make that recommendation. I would need to check the statute because, and back up a little bit, I don't have all of it with me here. It's really crazy complex with the statutes is because they're just piecemealed.
Right.
And so this list is a list of all of your fees.
Yeah,
Some of the fees.
I failed to say that.
There's two different sets of statutes depending on whether it's this type of fee or that.
Yeah.
Some of them didn't even have to come to you.
Okay.
Some of them had to come to you. Some of them say they have to be based on actual costs, and so back to your question, Chair, is that I will check to see if we can. I think one of the problems is at one point, there was a question of whether or not we could even put in a cost of living one because it was supposed to be based on some sort of cost of living thing. I mean, actual costing. And so I'll look at that and see if that works. We have a lot of our other fees indexed, automatic increases. These are not, and I got to figure out why that was and whether or not we can index them. But that's fine to make that recommendation. Whether or not that actually gets adopted is part of what I have to review and what council will decide.
And I would just add to that, that is one of the questions I asked, because I was like, man, why don't these get indexed? Because certain fees we collect, well, nobody really trusts me with money, so I don't get to collect any fees. It's not because I spend it though, Commissioner Burson. I really, you can look at my cars. 3 broken ones right now, yes. But I won't be having a red Ferrari. But I kind of did ask about that question, and it is strange because there are certain fees that pertain to subdivisions and partitionings that have to go before Planning Commission. Other fees just have to be adopted by council. And I will say this, is that I actually talked to Shannon about this, and I discussed it, and I said, I don't feel right about putting a whole bunch of fees out there and not bringing it all to the Planning Commission first. And, that was an effort for us to be more transparent with the fees and to give more opportunity for people to show up and testify in hopes of giving that opportunity. So that's kind of the thought process, if that helps.
It was actually simpler too.
Yes, for sure. For sure it was easier to just go, okay, here they are.
There's all of them.
Here's a chart.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. May I just ask some little nitty-gritty details about what some of these things are?
Yeah.
So, and some of these, and I know Dina and you put in a ton of work to try to find comparables in the other cities, and I realize it's difficult because it's not apples and apples. So some of these, it looks like other cities don't charge the fees, but maybe they're buried somewhere else or something. So I was a little bit alarmed to think, well, gosh, yes, we're not charging as much as others, but we have 15 other fees that we charge, but that may not be true because you just couldn't find the information, and so that's probably fine. But what is a dealer's license? What
Dealer's
kind of dealer?
Yeah. So that's so the dealer's license is a DMV dealer's license approval. So the Department of Motor Vehicles requires that when a dealer establishes itself in a local government, we have to sign off on that dealer's license.
So like a car lot, you mean?
Yeah, the location. So we have to look at the zoning and if it's allowed and write up a little thing for them.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Let me just check quickly if I had some others. Sign permits for special occasions. What are we talking about there?
Yeah, so excuse me, the sign code, what year was it? So, we've amended the sign code. Some of you were around the last time we amended the sign code, and I don't remember if that came in that amendment or was it that amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
We increased the fee on it.
We created it, and we didn't have it before. So the idea with that particular thing is for like a grand opening event. Our sign code is fairly restrictive as far as what size of banners you can put up and that you can only have one and things like that. And so when we opened up the sign code, there was testimony received from the business community that said, hey, well, what about like a big party or a grand opening event or something like that? So council, planning commission, I don't know who, somehow we got directed to create a process and a permit, if you will. It's a pretty simple little one-page permit that they submit to us. They tell us where they're at. They tell us what they're going to do. And it basically gives them carte blanche for a limited amount of time to advertise their special event.
Okay, thank thank you for that. And then I just had one last comment. You already may know about this, but at a previous job I had, we used this timekeeping software called Toggle.
Okay.
And so that was just
Okay.
throwing it out there.
No, that's
You
great to
need
know.
Start tracking.
Yeah, that's great to know. Thank you.
TOGGL.
Okay.
Project codes, nope. I used to build down to the 10-minute, like, I hated life like that.
Oh, same here.
Prorated and everything else like that, like, no thanks.
It was my former job. That's probably why.
Lawyers do 6.
Yeah. Well, so initially I had this question, like, what are the developers thinking about it? What are the builders thinking about it? Considering that we have a couple on the dais here, they're awfully quiet. I actually have very limited concerns on those things. What are the other thoughts we have on this? All right. Should we close the public hearing? Any no's? All right. We will close the public hearing at 7:01. And let's get a motion on the table, please.
All right, I'll move to approve the land use fee increase, middle housing land division, and that's a development, right? The middle housing land division fee as presented by the staff.
Second.
Okay, so just, I'd like to ask for some clarification. Are you only asking to create the fee for the middle housing portion?
No, I was assuming we have to add that, that's a new fee, right?
Well, I'll defer.
Oh,
I'll defer to the city
I see where
attorney.
you're going. I
Right,
see where
right.
you're going. Okay.
We're adding a fee and
So
then
we're adding a
increasing.
fee and then
Have a
we're,
special motion to create that new fee, or can they just adopt the whole chart?
Yes.
So,
and increase.
so, yeah, if the intent of the motion is to adopt that, including the mill fees, then it would be, as Shane pointed out, recommend approval of proposed list of fees. For that motion, if you're looking at recommending the entire chart.
Correct. I would restate it if it makes it easier.
well,
Yeah.
maybe I'm the only one confused. When you say that, I hear that we're just adding or approving the middle housing fees and not the others. That's what I heard. So I'm just asking for clarification on it.
Yeah, and I don't think that was Francisco's intent.
Okay.
No, that was not my
Okay.
intent. So my intent is to recommend approval of the 21% increase on existing fees with the addition of the middle
Got it.
housing land division fee as presented by the staff.
Second.
I think we gotta make that 21.5.
just
clarification. Essentially, it's just the chart as presented. Because some of them aren't exactly 21.5, so.
So I think Commissioner Salvador was the first and then you were the second, right? All right. Thank you for clarifying that. I apologize. Maybe I just misheard, and so thank you for having clarification on that. I would like to offer a friendly amendment to that, which would be indexed, for staff to go back and look at the annual index.
I accept that amendment.
Commissioner Herb?
I second.
Exactly what your nomination then, I'm sorry.
My friendly amendment is to include, to add the annual indexed, but I think City Attorney Johnson's gonna have to research which ones can be indexed and which ones can't.
Oh, okay.
Going forward.
Going forward, yeah.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Well, so let me clarify on the vote. So we got an acceptance by the first and a acceptance by the second, correct? All right, in discussion, Commissioner
What
Armstrong.
about the annual, maybe you're talking about that include the database study?
That was not part of my friendly amendment, but I think in our discussion, I think that was just a course that Shane had anticipated doing. But if we want to formalize it by a second friendly, I suppose we could do that, right?
I would propose.
And I would second that. So I think the friendly amendment would be for staff to keep track of the time actually being spent on some of these and just give some evidence-based.
Was the mover and the second okay with that or not?
Yes, I will approve.
So we have two friendlies. All right. Both are good. Commissioner Burson, do we want to add a third?
No, I'm confused about the two because they seem to be competing things. You're trying to index it with the cost of living.
Right.
That the fees would actually just change, mirroring the cost of living each time, proposing that to the council.
Right.
And the other one is that you want them to study and say, okay, this fee actually costs us this, and so we propose to raise it to that. So they seem to be competing.
I agree with that.
No, it's not competing.
Stand by. City Attorney Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to interpret that as the gold standard would be an actual cost study, which we're not going to do all the fees every year.
Right.
In the interim, you would have some sort of indexing, if that is allowed, for whichever fees, so that we don't get stuck in this situation again. Commissioner Burson is right. Just from a technical point of view, those are kind of competing ways to adjust the fees, but I could see them being used in combination too. Up to you folks if you want to clarify that any further. I would tell you that your hard part of the motion is, here's the chart, we recommend these fees.
Right.
The other one is a recommendation about how to go forward
Right.
in kind of an abstract way.
Right.
And although I would agree that those could be seen as competing, I think that those could be reconciled. If you want to choose one over the other, you can too. It's up to you folks.
Well,
I would add.
What does that mean?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you could do the time study.
Mm-hmm.
And then, instead of having to redo that every year, you use the COLA.
And that's the other way to reconcile it too, you're right. Mm-hmm.
And maybe do it every 5 years where you're
Right.
looking or something, but not every year.
So may I please add, just to clarify, we're approving this list as it's proposed, 21.5%. Annually going up by the cost of living index. However, for the next year, 2 years from now, we would like to have an additional adjustment based on our study, if necessary. That's what I'm proposing.
Commissioner Burson. No, please.
So.
This is fun. We haven't had this much fun in a while.
Again, I don't think the motion is the consumer price index. I think it is the cost of living that the workers in the planning department are receiving. So right now we have cost of living indexes in like 9% or so. And
That's right.
I don't think the budget committee, I've been there a long time, they're gonna like throw 9% at the.
We just don't have it.
I'm just saying is, I mean, just to be clear on the consumer price, or the index is what you folks would receive on cost of living, not the consumer price index.
I think the more proper term is cost of living adjustment,
Right.
not CPI.
Right.
Cost of living
Correct.
adjustment,
And I think-
actual city of Keizer cost of living adjustment.
And that was my motion, I believe,
Okay.
was based
Okay.
off of
All right.
cost of living.
And, yeah, and I mean, I think my understanding is you want us to look at which ones can be done like other city fees that are indexed, and that's normally the term we use. The fees are indexed each year
Based on COLA.
based off of that.
Right.
So that we can definitely do.
Would you like me to restate all of this?
No, Debbie's got it.
You got it?
I think
I'm
Mark
good
did
now.
a good job.
I'm good.
I
I'm
think
just-
what I can tell you.
Just for consumer price index.
Well, let's go ahead and let Debbie read what
Approving
she's
list
got.
as proposed with an annually increased by COLA, cost of living adjusted, and I would put in parentheses, actual city of Keizer COLA. However, next year, you would like an adjustment based on the time spent study if necessary.
I'll get a little better grammar in that too. It's a little rough still.
On the fly, it's pretty good. Commissioner Grants. So we're still under discussion on this
Yeah,
motion. Yes.
so I don't think it's appropriate to include in this recommendation how staff should track their time for some future cost increase, pricing increase, when they're just here asking for an increase. Shane says he's interested in doing it. He wants to do it.
Yep.
I don't think it's appropriate.
I think for transparency purposes, I think it should be appropriate for us if we're giving them the COLA adjustment without, just a normal revolving thing if possible. But if the fees are, as Commissioner Avishon has said, the delta between them is really big, if we want to have a larger fee increase because time in one area is more than another, I think it's appropriate to justify that based on the actual time it takes to do something. I think that's the intent here. I don't know if maybe that isn't, but I mean, sitting on budget and seeing how our budget process works, I think that's a very positive thing for the community to see. We would like to increase this by maybe 150% because we're spending these many employee hours and it's costing us this to do this one fee.
It's cost recovery is what you're talking
Right,
about.
right.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. And I would just say, as a planning commission, these are ideas that we are asking and talking through, and this is a recommendation to go to council, and they might just say, no, that we don't want to do that or something. So I don't think we're just like dictating what you have to do. I think we're adding our input, that ways we see this could be transparent for the and better ways of handling it instead of a 9-year, nothing and 21.5% suddenly. So I think it's appropriate. But.
Is that even in the scope of what the planning commission, telling them how to track their time for cost recovery, is that something that's even in our scope, or is that like a finance thing?
I don't.
Do you want me to answer?
You, please.
I think, so a couple things. I understand, I'm the one that kind of put the idea out there that's why I'm not proposing a bigger fee increase, because I'm not comfortable with it. I think the way that the city is structured, the planning commission is, you make recommendations to city council. I am your staff liaison. So you can ask me for information, but the planning commission can kind of drive the boat on the planning work that they do. The day-to-day operations of the city, I'm an employee of the city manager. I'm not an employee of the planning commission or the city council. City council employs the city manager, and if the city manager tells me I need to do something a certain way, then it's between me and him, or I, get fired. But generally in day-to-day operations of the city, this kind of work would really fall under the purvey of the planning director. It's my job to bring a recommendation and tell you why I'm bringing that recommendation. It's really your job to say, yeah, we agree and we want to take this to council, or Shane, we disagree and our recommendation is different that we're taking to council. So that's really, as far as process goes, I'm not super concerned about it one way or the other. It does muddy the waters a little bit because I have a responsibility in the department to manage the overall workload of the department and make sure we're getting everything done. And whether or not we're going to track our time every single time for this next year or not is kind of driven by day-to-day operational need. As I said, I threw it out there that's kind of what, when Dean and I looked at all of this stuff together, we said, man, we really need to go back and track our stuff and see where we're at, because it's all over the place. And by the way, we didn't put in your packet the city of Salem fees.
Yeah, no.
So, there's, what's that?
What was it?
It's because they're crazy high.
Well,
And it's not, and as I said, there is.
You can't even compare them.
And the other thing I have to think about is that perspectives and policies that are set by electeds and governing boards, they may have different priorities in place of what they're looking at, what their fees are doing. Are they wanting those to make money and be a source of revenue, or are they more to be a static kind of system? And so that's something that I have to take those kinds of directions from our elected officials and ultimately my boss. And so that's why this
recommendation was one that I'm very comfortable standing up and saying, hey, here's what we did, here's what I think for right now. I don't personally want to be under compulsion to come and report back to you on a date certain with a new recommendation for something if I don't have the data for you. So that's the only concern I have, is that we don't know when applications come in. So, but I definitely understand that if I were to turn around and come back to you with another fee increase, if I didn't have some data to support it, I'm hearing from a lot of you, and I agree, you're not going to want to support that as anything I would recommend. So does that help clarify what at least my take on it is?
Commissioner Grants.
Just two other considerations that I've thought about here. So tracking time to a project, I don't even know if staff has the technological capability to do that. And if they don't, they certainly don't have the budget capacity to just go buy it. And two, with a projected 16 land use applications in a year, over 30 different fees, what kind of statistical, you're not even going to get accurate numbers.
Yeah, I mean, so to speak to that, my anticipation is that if, and it's an if, we were to come back to you in the future, a year from now or 2 years from now, and say, hey, we've done some looking at these things, there's a whole lot of fees on there that we're not going to have any data for.
That's right.
I've worked here for 25 years. There's been one annexation. There will be no annexations unless a UGB gets expanded. Actually, no, I take it back. There's one little spot that I think theoretically could get annexed up off of Wheatland. But there just isn't, there's not going to be that comparable. But we will have partitions. We will have subdivisions.
You had to say it won't, because now it's going to be.
I know, well, maybe, it'd be awesome. It'd be something new. I've never done an annexation.
So I'm going to say for the record, I'm not going to support the motion as it is right now, simply because I'm not, I don't like the second friendly amendment to it. I'm not comfortable with, I think I trust Shane and Dina to come back with that information as it's relevant to the need of moving forward. I still think as an aside, it might be worth just kind of hearing and understanding about it at some point. I agree with Commissioner Grants that after a year and 16 possible applications, we're not going to have enough statistical data to really make a dent in this thought process. So that's just my opinion on it. I won't be supporting the motion as it is right now with the second amendment.
But my understanding of the way that motion was worded was that if they wanted to bring a bigger increase than what the COLA would be on a specific fee, they could choose to do that. If they did, they would bring data to support that. That's the intent that I thought was read when Debbie said that.
Well,
That wasn't a mandate that they had to do it. It was that if you wanted to increase the fee
Okay.
more than the COLA fee, then you would, and whichever fee you want, not all of them, but the one you'd want, you would bring data. That was.
Well, that changes the calculus for me a little bit, because it's been like 7 minutes since we last heard the motion. We talked about a lot of things. Is that accurate, Debbie?
Yes, there is if they would like an adjustment based on the time spent, they should study if necessary. It kind of looks like that. It's kind of hard to tell. I'll have to listen to the tape. Perhaps maybe Francisco can restate his motion
Yeah.
to include whatever amendments he
Well,
wanted in it.
do we need to close out this motion, or do we just withdraw it? I mean, I don't, like, I'm so lost at this point. Robert's rules or Bobby's rules now, and we're just making them on the fly, so.
Well, when you have multiple friendly amendments, sometimes it gets like that. So, yeah, I mean, the easiest thing to do would be to, since they were friendly amendments and both the mover and the second stated them, you can, either withdraw the motion and restate it, if the mover and the second both agree, which would be probably the better way to do it if you're not satisfied with the current motion as amended twice.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. So I would like to withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Second.
All right, and obviously as a result, the friendly amendments die, right? Okay, let's
Right.
try this one more again.
Right, yeah, that's correct. It dies when it's withdrawn.
All right. Commissioner Grants, you want to try it? Or do we want to have Commissioner Saldivar do it? I mean, he did a good job. He did a really good job summarizing it.
You did, absolutely. You tracked it very well.
Go ahead.
I propose a motion that we recommend approval of the fee increases and additional fees requested per the chart that was part of our packet.
Any second?
With an ongoing adjustment based on the cost of living adjustment.
Actual cost of living for Keizer, correct?
Yes.
Adjustment for Keizer, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Could we add if they want to bring forward a higher price for?
His motion is as it is, so if there's no second, we can go back to,
Was there no second?
there has not been a
Has not
second
been a
so far.
Oh, wrote it down for nothing.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So, to approve as presented with the index based off of Keizer's cost of living adjustment. Good? All right. Any additional discussion on this? Shane's like,
Wait, you did get a second?
yes, Commissioner Burson.
It won't help.
I still would like to see, I mean, I guess we don't have to add it in there, because if they come back with a fee increase higher, we can demand some more data. I just don't think it's appropriate to bring, if they're gonna come with a fee increase without data, I think.
Beyond the COLA.
Commissioner Avishon is absolutely correct, and when we have to justify this to people, when it comes to money, it's really easy for people, there's no one in the room, it's two people. They could get heated over it, but. Well, we were talking about no before, but two people in the room, but it is something that is more appropriate for us to have data to say, we increase this fee by 150% or whatever the number is, because the data showed this X, Y, Z. Right, I think that is an appropriate thing to be asking for in the future. But the cost of living adjustment, that is also very appropriate. But if you're gonna go beyond the 3%, 3.5%, you know, we do every year in the city, then that would be appropriate to have more data. But I don't think, I guess my question to the community is, are we okay with having this proposal without that caveat, and then coming back if they do moving forward with something? Because that's what the proposal is right now. The motion is to approve and then add the index approval,
Right.
but there's no condition of them doing any kind of looking at a fee specifically for data collection.
I would like to.
And that's what the motion says.
Thank you, Chair. And I think Shane pointed it out, and I would mention it too, that I would be recommending that any future fee increases beyond the CPI, and even if we don't do the CPI, very often that we do at least a limited study based on what we're able to do. And I think Shane indicated that's what he was going to do anyway. So I think you're going to see that.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear again, though, you keep using CPI.
Yeah.
And it's
COLA.
cost of living adjustment in Keizer. I just want to be clear, because those are two different things. Correct. Okay.
Commissioner,
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. And so I agree with that and what has been said about that, and I feel comfortable that we don't have to have it in this motion.
okay. Any other comments or thoughts? All right. Okay, we'll go ahead and call all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Well, Dina and Shane, thank you for the good work on this. Yeah, it was interesting. I'm just calling it interesting. So what do we have? Any additional new old business or anything to add on the staff report?
Okay, yeah, I thought it would be short, so I'm going to keep this part short. I don't have a whole lot for new and old business for you, but I did want to kind of let you know, we've been going through, we're doing a climate-friendly areas study, or walkable mixed-use area study, as we like to call it, that's being funded by the state of Oregon in response to the CFAC rules. We've been working on that for a little bit. The COG is providing us technical assistance. We have an engagement consultant that's helping with that. And Dina's just been spending some time this past week getting some things on. We have a city webpage for some of these things. We just got a little survey up, so we wanted to let you guys know that. We're planning on sending out a little one-pager, I don't know what you call it, description thing, and with some information through our interested citizens list through Debbie. You'll start seeing some more things come out about it. It's not a project that's like super time sensitive because it is a study. It's not actually it's not anything real, but I wanted to bring that to your attention. I know I've spoken of these CFAC rules in the past with you all. Things are starting to get a little bit more real as far as where we're at in our processes. I get to go to the Southeast Keizer community dinner on Friday night and share some information and kind of introduce myself and kind of start getting the word out. So it kind of goes along with what our meeting started with, which was that engagement piece and how we get people involved. So I just kind of wanted to make you aware because you all are in the community and you have a sphere of life around you that you interact with. And I'm asking, hey, help us get the word out on all things planning, but this is one of them that is, we're putting some things out there, asking some questions as we're doing this study of areas that would be appropriate for walkable mixed-use areas. So that's kind of my one thing that I wanted to make sure to share with you all.
When's that going to start layering on our TSP, Transportation System Plan?
So gosh. Okay, so I don't know exactly time frame. I will say I shared with the Budget Committee because this was a comment that was asked to me last night at the Budget Committee as well. With the climate-friendly equitable community rule-making process, there's a whole bunch of things that have been changed in the rules, and there's still, as you know, there's still some question on, are they going to stand? Are they going to get changed? Are they going to go away because of a lawsuit? And obviously we don't know those answers yet, but if they were to just continue forward as if what was adopted last August, I think is when it was adopted, basically the climate-friendly area study is one element. And it's kind of an initial step with a certain time frame. So we're going through the study and then we'll have to adopt climate-friendly areas in another year. We're also in the middle of going through our scenario planning process, which includes Marion County, City of Salem, and us. And so we've actually already been having meetings at a staff level. Elected officials have gotten together, kind of decided on how the governance structure will work. By the end of June, we are having to submit a kind of joint work program to the state for approval that have some different timelines outlined for different work that needs to be done. And basically, as we wrap up that scenario planning process, I want to say 2026, the TSP would kind of directly follow. I will say the one silver lining of this thing is ODOT and the state of Oregon has basically created a direct line for communities like ours that are part of this scenario planning group, or it's a scenario planning process, to move forward and be able to go through and get support to update those TSPs, as opposed to the highly, highly competitive TGM grant process that we've been dependent on in the past, which is why our TSP hasn't been updated since 2009. So it's not just fees, guys. It's lots of things that take a while. So that, I would say that's the one silver lining, is if this process moves forward, we're pretty much guaranteed we're going to get a TSP update because it has to align with that scenario plan that ends up being adopted. It's still a few years out, but those wheels are grinding, at least in part. So,
Sweet.
yeah.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Chair Boyer. You kind of threw it out there, the lawsuit. I would love to know if there's a status update on that, and if all the cities are still in, and if new cities have come on board.
So the briefing on both sides plus amicus briefs has been finished. I believe the League of Oregon Cities, Washington County, Clackamas County, all joined as amicus on the side of the cities. Marion County is an actual party along with 10 other cities. And all that briefing has been finished, both the initial briefs plus the reply briefs. And we just got word that oral argument on it will be July 12th, which is extremely fast. And if you folks did not get the word, and I'm sorry, I don't know if you did or not, but when when our coalition, as we call it, moved to stay the rules, which is not granted very often at all, given the fact that they're going to effect immediately, the first of this year. The court administrator, who we believe was, it wasn't just a court administrator. The court basically said no, but said two things real clearly, and that is they wanted it assigned to a panel quickly, which was usually a 3-judge panel, and have it scheduled for what they've called the rocket docket, which to attorneys is quite fast, to lay people is slow. But to have that heard immediately and a briefing schedule, and they said would not be extended except in extraordinary circumstances. So they put in language that they were very interested in this case and understood that time was of the essence because the rules are going into effect. Staying the rules is something that just doesn't happen very often. So although we were disappointed, not surprised, but to have the briefing schedule, and it did move incredibly quick compared to most cases. I was quite surprised that it got oral argument on July 12th. I thought it'd be at the end of the summer at the soonest. So July 12th, yeah. So there's no guarantee that a ruling would come quickly, but I have hopes that the ruling would come quickly, perhaps as soon as by the end of summer. If not, they're going to do it may be closer to fall.
Well, and House Bill 2659 is parked in rules right now, which kind of addresses the CFEC rules and some of those other things. But, the hearing, interestingly enough, seemed to support that potentially moving forward, but it's parked in rules right now, just kind of waiting for something to happen. So it's kind of interesting.
Say that in layman's terms.
House Bill, basically I had to get out of committee by a specific date. And so the legislature can put it into either Ways and Means, rules, or
What bill is that?
House Bill 2659. It's a bill that was presented that basically requires DLC to kind of go back and, for lack of a better term, redo the rules. And then it has to have a certain percentage of the impacted cities approve it and so on and so forth. It's an interesting bill. I don't know that it's going to go anywhere, but it did seem in committee to at least have some support. It was a bicameral, bipartisan bill, so.
So is it, just so I can understand how it's relating to this comment in equitable
Basically, it would pause the existing rules, go back and redo them, and then.
So stop those.
Correct. I think that's accurate, right?
Correct.
And then we wouldn't have to have the lawsuit
Correct.
at this point anyway.
Correct. I mean, in theory, I guess, if they change the law, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anything else? Nothing? Okay, Councilor Duran.
Good evening. I've been kind of quiet because this stuff does pertain to what I do, but these fees compared to other jurisdictions are very low, so I'm not too concerned. And I don't think I have ever had to do anything here in Keizer where I've used these fees. I have in Salem, and believe me, they are much higher. So this recommendation for me is fine. So I will take some of your comments back as we deliberate on this, and I think what you guys came up with is adequate and will work just fine. So I too would agree. It would be nice to see more people involved in these actions, but people just don't understand until it's physically affects them that they should have had a voice, and I don't know how we can ever get that.
Either that or it means we're just doing a really good job and people trust us.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, they trust us until they see something that affects them. And that's the same way with city council. So the city council's been working on the budget, obviously. That was the last 2 days we spent on that, and there's some some interesting things coming up. We've got ARPA funds that we're, using up and things that we're putting that money towards. So you guys will get to see that stuff come to a head in the next month or two. So the city council's working on the city manager's evaluation right now and also the city attorney's evaluation. So that's something that we've been working on. And the city council rules of procedures. We've done some clarifications of ages for youth liaisons. So not a whole lot that's really, in the meat of things, but things that just have to get done. So that's where we're at right now.
Great. All right, so we have Manpreet. It's your last meeting with us. I have to say that, we've, since I've been a planning commissioner, I've had 2 student liaisons, and I have been incredibly impressed with the thoughtfulness of the questions that you've asked. I think we've all just kind of sat here and went, wow, those are really good questions, and it's I think, instigated a lot of really good responses from the planning commissioners. And so I just want to say, are you a senior this year? You're a senior, right? So whatever you do, I can guarantee you it's going to be fun and exciting. And I really look forward to someday coming and doing an update with you on city council as you sit on the dais. I think you bring a tremendous amount of, as I mentioned, thoughtfulness and energy to this otherwise kind of dry committee sometimes. I mean, it's a lot of words, it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of pretty heavy detailed stuff. I mean, we're not unfortunately building parks or doing like that. It's some pretty difficult stuff. So I just want to say thank you for all that. Thank you for the time you've spent with us, and just wish you best of luck. What are you going to be doing this time next year, do you think?
Well, I'm going to OSU and I'm going to major in architectural engineering.
Okay.
So it's kind of,
That's kind of what you did,
it
isn't it?
has been somewhat influenced by this committee because like I see like stuff in this group that like I might be involved in stuff like this in the future. So like especially this meeting, like seeing all the back and forth, like that was a lot more interesting than previous ones. And so it's been a good experience. Like you told me like last time, like I might not understand all of it now, but like maybe in the future it'll settle into like, oh, well, that's a really cool thing I didn't know I was younger. So.
It's incredible, and I think that as you talk with your peers when you go into college and stuff like that, you've got a very unique experience here, and I just want to commend you on taking the time out of your senior year to come and spend it with us. I think that's very admirable. We do have a card for you, and I'd like to open it up to any other commissioners or staff if they've got any comments.
Go Beavs. Sorry, I went there. I said go Beavs.
Well, I said encouragement.
That was very encouraging.
Shane, please.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. Manpreet, I would just say thank you. Thank you very much for being a part and participating in our meetings. And yeah, Chair Lawyer said it nice. This meeting can be kind of boring. I try to keep it as entertaining. Dry is a good word. I try to keep it as entertaining as I can. But yes, sometimes I go home and my feelings are hurt because not more people show up to listen to us talk, and I feel like I need more jokes. But no, in all seriousness, I've really appreciated you being here, and some of the questions you've asked and some of the interactions, I've been like, oh, that's really awesome. And being a dad of kids that are in college, it's really hard parenting young adults. Like every stage of life is harder, but you seem like an awesome kid, so I'm sure your parents are super proud of you. And it is awesome because my kids they don't always give me my son doesn't always give me the most hope for the future. Love you, Cruz. But you do it's great that you're coming, giving your time, engaging, being a part. And it's great to see that in our next generations that are going to be moving into leading our cities and our communities. So thank you so much for being here.
I think that's the first time Shane's been told he had a sense of humor, so good job. All right, any other parting thoughts or ideas before you take off and go graduate and do amazing things?
I did have something to say about your time
Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, actually, our environmental technical division might be a decent resource. I would be happy. I mean, you could give me a call and we can talk. There are some pretty decent resources on different state level websites. We don't have a ton of data. That's kind of part of what we're doing with this work. We have to do some scenario planning to look at, the state has some goals for overall reductions. And so we have to kind of align land use planning and transportation planning over how we can move toward those goals. So like, I mean, really like simplistically, it's like, how do you get more people out of cars and into transit? Or how do you make your cities more able for people to park once and walk to different places? So that's kind of like the land use planning element of it. But transportation is a big piece too. But yeah, I mean, I think if you want to call in, we could definitely connect you. I think our environmental technical division, they might have some ideas too, because they do a lot of things with that kind of stuff.
She said she was major.
All right. Well, again, best of luck and thank you for all your time you spent here, and look forward to, when you have some time off and you want to come back and be thoroughly entertained, either tune in on Keizer TV through Facebook, or maybe we might even have some Zoom options. You can just chime in and say hi.
Right.
Or you can come sit and bring your friends. Bring your friends. Let Debbie know in advance, we'll bring cookies. It'll be a thing.
Right, maybe if we got like a popcorn machine or something like that. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I think if we get a popcorn machine, Dina's gonna be very happy. She's gonna watch all this nonsense up here.
Yeah, right.
All right, Council Representative, Monday, you gonna be good to go?
Yeah.
All right. Otherwise, if there's no other witty statements or remarks, we'll see you back here on June 14th. We stand adjourned at 7:43 and 50 seconds.
Thank you.